once seen as a symbol of modernity, order, and miraculously prolonged childhood. But in that very place, every minute that passes, 3 elderly people quietly depart from life, while only 1.3 children are born. That imperfect number may sound small, but it's a sign of an unprecedented demographic tragedy. The pace of life here is slowing down to the point where it can no longer replace the lives that have departed.
2025 is the timeframe when what the Japanese call a survival limit is approaching for 9 Japanese people.
And the world is holding its breath watching Japan, as if looking into its own future. Because here, past, present, and future are colliding in a crisis with no progress, but powerful enough to shake the entire concept of a nation's survival. What is the 2025 problem as the golden generation enters old age? There is a generation that once created miracles for Japan. They were born between 1947 and 1949.
Right when the country had just passed through the most difficult period in its modern history.
These people grew up in deprivation, but carried within them the spirit of reconstruction and strong faith in the future. They were the ones who helped turn Japan into a world-leading industrial, scientific, and technological power. The Japanese call them by a respectful name, the baby boom generation, or also known as the golden generation. But now, more than 70 years later, that generation that lifted Japan up is collectively turning 75. And 2025 is precisely when this becomes clearly evident. It's also when the entire country must face an unavoidable truth. Japan is entering a phase of super-aged population, with enormous pressure weighing on the entire social security system. Age 75 is a very special milestone in Japan's healthcare system. This is the stage where spending indicators for healthcare, pensions, and long-term care begin to increase dramatically. Chronic diseases, cognitive decline, needs for regular home care, nursing homes, caregivers. All of these require money, human resources, and most importantly, a society strong enough to support them. But currently, Japan is in a paradoxical situation. The younger generation is shrinking while the older generation is growing.
The number of taxpayers is decreasing, but the number of benefit recipients keeps increasing.
All previous insurance, welfare, and pension models were built on the assumption that the young would support the old. That's no longer true. In Japan, that balance has tilted too far and there. The Japanese government has called this period the 2025 problem, no longer a warning but a reality that's very close. For over 30 years, this country has tried every method to reverse the situation, from encouraging childbirth, supporting women, pension system reforms, to workforce restructuring. Just the numbers, what? There's no chaos, no alarms, only more nursing homes appearing, hospital beds filling up, and people quietly leaving together. The country is quietly entering its twilight years in silence, with no one knowing for sure what will happen next. Japan, a country shrinking every minute. Imagine you're looking at a clock. When the second hand moves one tick, somewhere in Japan 3 elderly people take their last breath. And in that moment, fewer than 2 children are born.
On average, each minute, this country's population decreases by nearly 2 people.
No major events are happening, just society slowing down, aging, and having so few children that it can't compensate for those leaving. In 2024, only about 720,000 newborns were born, the lowest number in Japan's modern history. This is also the 9th consecutive year of declining birth rates, and there are no signs that number will increase again soon. What's happening is no longer a prediction, but an undeniable reality. You might see young couples hand in hand taking wedding photos at Tokyo's Imperial Palace. They're radiant and fresh, creating the feeling that marriage and love are still blooming. Notice half of them Aaron. And that beauty turns out not to belong to Japan's demographic future. In 2024, only about 500,000 Japanese couples registered marriages, an alarming number. In a society where almost all children are born within marriage, fewer marriages mean fewer children being born. An entire new generation is being cut off right from the concept. Every year, Japan holds coming-of-age ceremonies for those turning 20.
But in recent years, the ceremonies aren't as lively as before. People are gradually realizing the youth population is thinning year by year.
And right in that surreal moment, the country continues to quietly shrink, minute by minute, person by person, not through upheaval but through the very silence of time. Why don't Japanese people have children? T have children because they dawn. S not that they. S economy has barely grown, wages haven. A young university graduate often faces income insufficient for independent living, let alone raising a child. Not rejecting family, they.
For women, the pressure is even greater. Despite high education and career success, when they have children, societal expectations immediately place all childcare responsibilities on their shoulders. Postpartum support policies in many places remain limited, lacking childcare facilities and flexible time arrangements.
Meanwhile, men are caught in an endless work cycle, making their fatherly role almost absent. Another silent factor is loneliness. Many young people live alone, without connections, sharing, or romance. Technology cannot replace real contact. When there's no intimate relationship, marriage becomes distant and having children disappears along with it. The saddest part isn't that they reject love or family. On the contrary, many still desire a warm home and children to raise together. Know where to start when they. Japan doesn't lack love, they lack a stable enough environment for that love to grow into a family. And while waiting for that, children remain unborn.
The disappearance of marriage and its silent consequences. In a country that once considered marriage the most important milestone in life, wedding bells are gradually fading.
Japan is witnessing something strange. Marriage is no longer the default dream of young people. No one opposes it, no one calls for rejecting family formation. Everything is just silently disappearing, like steam dissolving into air. In 2024, only about 500,000 Japanese couples registered for marriage, the lowest in modern history. Telling ISN. Young people wonder if they're good enough, stable enough, attractive enough to be chosen as partners. Unlike many countries where having children outside marriage is normal, in Japan, almost all children are born within official families. Mary, you won. The domino effect becomes clear. Fewer marriages lead to fewer children. Fewer children lead to school closures, empty childcare centers, aging communities without young replacements. Streets once bustling with student sounds now only have walking sticks and wheelchair wheels. Society becomes more fragile, not because of turmoil, but because of missing bonds. But perhaps the saddest part isn't the decline in marriage, but that too many people pass through youth without ever experiencing a real relationship. T choose loneliness, they. But dinners remain empty, rooms stay dark, and sleep comes alone. Without noise or declarations, marriage is retreating from Japanese life, and its consequences are spreading silently like underwater currents. What is the Japanese government doing? Quiet efforts. No one can say the Japanese government isn't acting. Over the past 3 decades, as birth rates gradually declined, warnings about population crisis have echoed in media, parliament, and various conferences. But between announced plans and ongoing reality, there's always been a difficult gap to fill. In Tokyo, authorities once implemented a special policy allowing civil servants to work 4 days a week to dedicate 1 day to dating. It sounds gentle, even romantic, but behind it lies a serious problem. Young people no longer have time to love, to meet, to start relationships. Work occupies entire days, while society gradually closes in. If no space is created for intimacy, how can marriage or children be expected? Other localities launched matchmaking apps, organized matchmaking events, supported wedding costs, childbirth expenses, rent, and childcare fees. T just about meeting people, but young people. Unsure if they. Unfortunately, most policies still target married couples, while the growing single population isn't made the focus. Those who've never entered serious relationships are precisely those who might permanently leave the social reproduction system, if not reached with appropriate policies. Though budgets are still allocated, initiatives continue, the general social atmosphere is silence. A silence born of weariness, when everyone knows the problem is too big, too deep, and can't be fixed overnight. Current efforts, though commendable, are like small patches on an old sail, while underwater currents threaten to sweep away the entire boat. The elderly, both burden and opportunity. Average lifespan in Japan has exceeded 90. This doesn't just mean Japanese live long, but live long while alert, active, and sometimes full of energy. If you visit a grassroots rugby field in Tokyo on a weekend afternoon, you'll see an amazing sight. 70-year-old men in yellow shorts, 80-year-olds in advanced shorts, competing, colliding like real athletes. T play for show, they play to live, and they proudly say aging ISN. However, social reality remains full of pressure. As the elderly population grows and fewer young people can provide care, the healthcare, pension, and welfare systems begin to falter. Costs increase yearly while resources thin out. The balance between caregivers and those needing care is heavily skewed. But the Japanese don't just see the burden, they also recognize a new opportunity: the economy for the elderly. Adult diapers have surpassed sales of baby diapers. Products like jelly tea, convenient chairs, spacious walkways, stores with integrated handrails, all have been redesigned to serve the elderly. From technology, food, sports to real estate, the elderly are becoming the center of the market. Not out of pity, but because they are the largest remaining consumer force. And Japanese companies don't just serve domestically but also export these innovations worldwide, where every society is aging.
Amid challenges, the image of elderly men still going to the field, elderly women still learning yoga, drinking ceremonial tea, and participating in community is a clear message.
Aging is inevitable, but facing it proactively, that's a choice only societies that truly understand themselves deeply can make. Unattended funerals when deaths outnumber births. In Japan,
where life expectancy is always among the highest in the world, hundreds of thousands of people pass away quietly each year.
But what makes people hesitate isn't the quantity, but how they end their lives, quietly with no one to see them off. In Tokyo Bay, small boats depart carrying the ashes of dozens with no relatives, no crying, no wreaths, no family.
Only funeral staff bowing on behalf, completing the ceremony, and quietly scattering the ashes into the sea. The Japanese call these unattended funerals, but farewell ceremonies with no attendees are becoming increasingly common as many people live alone until the end,
and their departure is as lonely as the lives they lived. Japan's funeral industry is changing to adapt.
Simple funeral packages emerge, no hesitation, no ceremony, just delivery of ashes. Some even proactively arrange their own funerals in advance, choosing music, scattering locations, farewell words.
Because they know when the time comes, there might be no one left to do it for them. All this doesn't just speak about the end, but about how a society is gradually losing its ability to connect. When relatives are sparse, when children are no longer a certainty, then the final days become quieter than ever. A unique sadness in farewells with no one to see you off. It doesn't. But a prolonged emptiness, like a door closing without anyone knowing. And in that silence, the living wonder, if in the end no one calls your name, will anyone remember the years that have passed? Immigration, the solution no one wants to mention. Population, there. When young people become fewer, when schools close, factories lack labor and society gradually slows down.
Then opening doors to welcome more people from outside seems like the obvious solution.
But in Japan, that obvious thing is the hardest to accept. In reality, more foreigners have come to Japan. Some residents living between Tokyo and Yokohama are forming small communities.
Like Indians working in the technology sector, living with families, children attending international schools.
Children play together in parks, mixing Japanese and their native languages. But adults remain closed off, as if just temporarily staying. Not truly belonging to this place. The problem isn't just cultural closedness, but how Japanese society still sees itself as a homogeneous, discrete block not easily changed. The government has begun loosening, accepting low-skilled labor.
In industries, young people no longer want to work in like nursing, construction, retail.
But policies remain cautious. Immigrants can work, but residency rights, citizenship, and deep acceptance from the community remain distant. Japan doesn't want immigration to become a blood transfusion. But at the current aging rate, this caution is bringing the country closer to irreversible contraction. Immigration isn't just a population solution, but a choice about the future. Will the country accept changing itself to continue existing,
or choose to preserve its identity and accept gradually disappearing in silence?
Compared to China, Korea, and the West, who will be the next Japan?
For many years, Japan has been called the future society, not because of technology but because of its aging speed.
But when looking at today's world, people begin to see clearly. That future is arriving faster and Japan is no longer a special case. Across the strait, South Korea, once seen as dynamic, modern and full of vitality, is falling into an even more serious situation.
South Korea's birth rate has dropped to a record low, not even 0.7 children per woman, the lowest in the world. Despite massive campaigns, long-term support policies, and financial incentives for childbirth, the results remain almost unchanged.
South Korean youth are increasingly delaying marriage or rejecting it altogether. And when the question of when to have children becomes too distant, the birth rate is just an inevitable consequence. Meanwhile, China is entering a particularly dangerous phase, with its population starting to decline even before the country has fully become wealthy. The one-child policy lasting nearly 4 decades has left a huge gap in the population structure.
Although the government has allowed 2 children and 3 children, and even encouraged more births, people remain uninterested.
Expensive housing, academic pressure, and high child-rearing costs all make having children seem like a losing transaction in the eyes of many young families. China is following the path Japan has taken, but on a larger scale and at a much faster pace. In the West, the situation is not much different. France and Germany have peaked in their working-age population and begun to decline.
Britain and the US, while maintaining stable birth rates, are also witnessing it. Social media, independent lifestyles, economic pressures, child insecurity are all causing younger generations in the West to fall into a state similar to what Japan experienced.
Delaying commitments, avoiding attachments, and gradually withdrawing into their own circles. It. Quiet, gradual, and irreversible by short-term solutions. The difference is that Japan has gone ahead, and while unable to stop the decline, they are trying to live with it in an orderly, non-chaotic manner. The question is no longer who will be the next Japan, but who will be better prepared when it comes. Because if this future is unavoidable, the only choice is how each country receives it. There is no catastrophe, no disaster, just individuals gradually passing away, new generations dwindling, and streets growing quieter each year. Japan is aging in silence, a silence not loud, but enough for the whole world to listen. Japan was once called the future of humanity not because of technology, but because they are ahead on the path that everyone will eventually take, a shrinking society, declining population, fewer young than old. And there, everything familiar must be reconsidered, from how to love, how to have children, how to live, to even how to leave this life. That's anything Japan is teaching the rest of the world, it.
Subscribe to the Unseen Realm channel to watch the latest video.